You're watching KCAL-TV, Norwalk, Los Angeles.
This is a Prime 9 News Special. Prime 990 with Pat Harvey and David Jackson.
Good evening and Happy New Year to you. And Happy New Year to you, David.
Happy New Year, Pat. In just 3 hours from now, we are going to be rushing into 1991, ready or not. But we are going to hang on to 1990, at least for the next few minutes.
1990 was an important year for us at Prime 9 News. It was our first. And for the next hour, we're going to share with you some of the stories that made our first year with you so memorable.
That's right. The more than 200 people of California 9 have one memory in common from last spring. Long days and nights and weekends building the new Prime 9 News.
You're right about that. Sometimes it seemed like the construction would never stop, but it did. And the cameras, the computers, and tape machines finally worked.
Then, finally, all of a sudden, it was March 5th, 1990, 8 p.m.
So I invite you to make our new home yours. And now the news.
People say to me, how many lives? How many lives can you expand? Each one's precious.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
I just think the Navy shouldn't let daddies go away this long, but still, they have to keep the world safe.
I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
It's Robin Williams Day. Everything is free.
I'm on my way. I'm making it. I've got to make it show, yeah.
It's not that easy being green, having to spend the day the color of the leaves. What shall I do? What steps should I take? What move should I make? Oh Lord, what shall I do?
How lucky we all were to have Sammy in our lives, and how dearly I will miss him.
You know, when the rest of the world thinks about Southern California, they think about sun, surf, and stars. But when you live here, you can add one more thing to that, a very important element, and that's fire. The Southland's Summer of Fire was at its height in Santa Barbara in the last week of June 1990. Writer Dick Cook and editor Diana Jenkins showed us what 4 years of drought, a heat wave, and an arsonist can do to a town.
It's bad. About 95% of the houses are going to be lost.
How about your home or your?
It's probably gone.
Gone. Which one is that?
Well, we've lost everything that we've saved. We didn't take anything out of the house, did we, Joan?
No, we just didn't have time.
We didn't have time to take anything, so it just came on us all of a sudden. So.
Oh, we felt very fortunate to get out with our lives because all of a sudden it came so fast, the wind was blowing so fast that just the trees in the backyard burst into flame, and then we realized that the front yard was burning too, and so we just ran out and hopped in the car, grabbed our dog, and we were fortunate we were able to drive out. When we drove along Cathedral Oaks, it was burning. We went towards Turnpike, and it was burning on both sides.
Hey, this is Rose's house.
Here's a Prime 990 update on the Santa Barbara fire. In the 6 months since that fire, fewer than 10% of the homes lost have been rebuilt. But most of the people who lost their homes say they will eventually rebuild right where their old homes used to stand.
Well, many Santa Barbarans will carry the emotional scars from the fire for the rest of their lives. The fires also leave their mark on the people who cover them. Writer Jay Avila and editor Tim Curran collected the thoughts of two Channel 9 News photographers who were on the fire lines this summer in Glendale and the Chino Hills.
When I first got to the scene, the first thing I saw that comes to mind was a young boy running down the street carrying his dog, and he was crying, and you could see the dog was scared, and the dog was shaking. From that point on, I knew that this was just no ordinary small house fire.
It was just mass confusion. I mean, you'd be focusing on, I would focus in on one house, and then right behind us, one would explode into flames.
It was definitely a war zone.
I could see a lot of firemen just falling and collapsing onto their knees from the fatigue, from the heat, the intensity of the heat.
The firemen have all the clothing. They have all the masks, breathing masks. They've got oxygen. They've got all kinds of protection. All we've got is a camera. For us, there's always tomorrow. For the people that lose it all, you just hope that they can put it all back together.
Santa Barbara, Glendale, Chino, Thousand Oaks. Wherever the flames struck in 1990, we heard about heartbreak. But we also heard about people pulling together, as people always seem to do when there's work to be done. Well, it was the biggest story of the year in California, and yet it happened half a world away. David will take us there next.
And imagine what it's like to grow up with fear and death being a constant companion. Kids of El Salvador don't have to imagine.
Neither do some kids a lot closer to home. They're all children of war, and you'll meet them next on Prime 990.
You're watching Prime 990 with Pat Harvey and David Jackson. This is Prime 9 News at 10.
From the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, a good evening. Here is the latest. A late-breaking story tonight is right here. Fighting has erupted in the Persian Gulf. Iraq has invaded Kuwait and moments ago claimed to have overthrown Kuwait's emir, who is the head of state. And at last report, 350 Iraqi tanks had rumbled through Kuwait City.
Thousands of miles away, that news changed a lot of lives in Southern California. If you buy gas for your car, you know what we're talking about.
And if you have a friend or a relative in the military, you also know what we're talking about.
But even before American troops arrived in the Gulf, Channel 9 News sent David to cover the crisis.
That's right. I was there very quickly. I arrived in Amman, Jordan, less than a week after the invasion itself. And I found two kinds of news there to report. On a large scale, there are hundreds of thousands of soldiers and sailors from around the world and the hundreds and thousands of square miles of Arabian desert that they've been assigned to protect. But while I was there, I also saw the big story of a possible war as a backdrop to thousands of individual struggles for survival.
Daily life is a daily battle for food, water, shelter, and medicine. It is survival of the fittest and of the fastest.
For more than 1,000 years, the Arab peoples have called this vast desert the Ocean of Stones. That's a poetic name for a place so stark that no human being can survive without shelter for more than a few hours, much less without food and without water for any length of time. The line that you see forming just behind me underneath this truck is a line for bread and bread alone, and that bread will not be handed out for more than another 2 hours.
Their enemy is not Saddam Hussein or George Bush, but a hot, ruthless sun that bakes them by day and then leaves them to face long, chilly nights. The refugees who flee the winds of war end up forsaken in an unforgiving desert, left to flee these winds from giant desert dust storms that occur almost every afternoon. They provide a bizarre, almost entertaining, but very dusty diversion for the thousands of refugees in the camps. A momentary distraction from their life and death struggle for food, water, and shelter. Today, officials announced the U.S. will provide $12 million worth of rice, flour, and vegetable oil to these people, most of them laborers from poor Asian countries. Now, both President Bush and Saddam Hussein have accused the other of lying about who has Arab support in the conflict. Hussein went on to say that Americans will be sent home in sad little coffins. All the messages from Iraq today have one theme: war is coming.
Of course, this story remains unfinished and the crisis itself unresolved. We are now 15 days away from the United Nations deadline for the Iraqis to withdraw from Kuwait, and as yet we still have no indication of exactly what they might do or might not do 15 days from right now. It could be that there will be, of course, more coverage on this story as it unfolds during 1991. Pat?
If war comes to the Persian Gulf, people there will come to learn what people in Central America already know: that war takes its heaviest toll on its smallest victims, children. I met a young boy in El Salvador who is trying simply to live as his country sinks deeper into its civil war. And Mark Watts introduced us to a boy from South Central LA, where there's also a war going on. It's a different kind of war than the one in El Salvador. Here they fight over turf and drugs instead of politics. We reported these two stories 6 months apart. Now we can't help seeing how similar they are, and how similar are the lives of the children of war thousands of miles apart. We'll show you both stories and see if you agree. We begin in San Salvador. Some of the street kids of El Salvador have found their way to shelters. It's not that easy. There are very few of them in this war-torn country. We found one in the heart of San Salvador. It is funded by a Swedish organization. Most of the children here have lost their parents. Some live with other relatives on weekends. Others still call the streets their home, but come to the shelter to shower and feed themselves. 14-year-old Manuel is one of those.
My father was arrested by the authorities. He was working in a sugar refinery, and then he disappeared, and I've never seen him again since then.
After his father was arrested, his mother moved in with another man and left him abandoned. Like many of the others, he is mature way beyond his years.
Yes, I feel very grown up, and since I was little, I've had to earn money to give to my mother and help her out.
The shelter offers the boys a chance to make a little money by organizing paper routes. This life, for Manuel, is much better than what he has known. He has lived with the war for as long as he can remember.
Yes, I wish it were over, but I've gotten used to living with it, because where I used to live before, we had combats all the time, because the guerrillas lived there and also the soldiers came through.
So with no family, no home, this little man looks to the future.
This is perhaps the biggest tragedy we have. Street children are perhaps one of the fastest growing population in El Salvador.
10-year-old Ricky Allen has been dodging the bullets for much of his young life. He has a front row season ticket to the daily war games. Unfortunately, he has seen about all the live action he can handle.
When I see a pile of people ganging up on one house, I scoot back.
You ever run in the house or hit the floor?
Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta hit the deck, huh?
Yeah. 3:30. My 24-hour companionship with Ricky revealed a life of constant exposure to frightening brutality. 5 years ago, someone tried to kill Ricky. The scar you see above his lip was caused when a broom handle was thrust through his jaw. He fell through a glass coffee table 3 years ago and crashed head-on into a telephone pole on a skateboard when he was 8. Physically, he's okay, but Ricky receives almost daily psychiatric treatment for a host of mental disorders and symptoms of post-traumatic stress syndrome. The only foundation he has to base his life upon is what he sees on the streets. 4 p.m.
Ricky! Kenisha! Get back over there! Get down here! Don't you see what they doing? Dion, move!
It's not often a photographer captures a gang shootout in progress. These pictures are dramatic. But for the kids living here, it's just a rerun of yesterday.
It's funny because sometimes we're so used to it that when it's late, everybody's disappointed.
The lights get turned out at the Allen house at 9 o'clock. The day starts all over again for Ricky at 7 o'clock in the morning. The bus picks him up at 8, and he admits his nights are often interrupted by fears that someone is going to come get him.
I might think about it, and I might get back, and I might get on the couch, because I get scared sometimes. I think they're coming in the house sometimes.
Rick in South Central LA and Manuel in San Salvador have one other thing in common. There's no end in sight to the conflicts that have taken so large a toll on their lives. Well, it's about as far from a big-budget Hollywood production as you can get.
But the movie they made on LA's Skid Row this year had something most movies do not have, and you'll see it next on Prime 990.
You're watching Prime 990 with Pat Harvey and David Jackson.
We're looking back at some of the stories that made 1990 such a memorable year for us and you at Prime 9 News. You know, if you took all the movie clips, video press releases, satellite news conferences, and video product demonstrations that entertainment editor John Corcoran got in the mail this year and piled them into a cardboard container, you'd have something that looks a lot like Corks tape box.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Corks Tape Box, where we take all these tapes that are sent to us unsolicited and find some use for them. Oh, did you know that October is National Pasta Month? And guess what? The pasta people were kind enough to send us a tape.
I have never known anybody who doesn't like pasta.
Why do I have the impression this guy never missed a pasta meal? But guess what? The pasta people were kind enough to send us manners expert Letitia Baldrige telling us exactly how you eat pasta.
You can twirl them with your fork, which is really the best way, or you can use a spoon to help you along as you twirl and eat it that way, or you can take a knife and cut them and make them shorter.
I've always been a fork twirler myself. Oh, the Nintendo people, which have a championship of some sort going on, sent us this. Watch this kid celebrate winning.
What's up? Peace, Mario, Nintendo rules. Love you, baby. All right.
Kind of fascinating to watch, wasn't it? Is it me, or is that kid kind of a living genetic record of the era from Woodstock Nation all the way up to the Arsenio Hall show? Oh, if you missed it, what he actually said was, oof, oof, oof. What's up? Peace, Mario, Nintendo rules. Love you, baby. Love you. If you'd like a copy of that, dial 1-900-GULLIBLE and I'll send it right to you. Oh, Letitia.
Very important to be very silent when you're eating pasta. Don't, for example, do like this.
Oh, in case you don't like pasta, the popcorn people want to make sure you get the word from everybody's favorite grandpa.
Everyone seems to like popcorn. Because it is such a fun item.
Well, that's it for this week's edition of Corks Tape Box. Good night, Letitia. Thanks also to the crack technicians who worked so hard to make this segment work. As always, they'll end it with the love theme from Corks Tape Box.
The homeless don't make many appearances in the movies that John Corcoran reviews, but a group of homeless men and women in Southern California made a big contribution this year to a movie with a message. Matt Stevens told us this story last May.
People that aren't involved in it don't know. They don't know, and they don't want to know. And that's the problem, I think.
Dan Levin grew up in Woodland Hills, a million miles from Skid Row. He had never seen its sidewalk slums, its rotten teeth, its yellow eyes, its swollen feet. He had never heard the cries for help hidden in its poetry.
Once there were a good job, fine clothes and diamond rings, houses in the hills, new cars and everything. Now my good job is gone. My wife and kids I'll never find. And my life is spent looking for food every day from line to line.
3 months ago, Levin decided to make the homeless the subject of a class project at USC. He made an 8-minute video and called it Hope. He began at the Tent City on Main Street, a place where well-to-do white kids with cameras are poisoned. Still, he made a few friends and a few promises, and he managed to keep them all.
There's Mama. Hi, baby. Hi, baby. Good. You look nice. You look really good. You got your hair all fixed up.
LaToya Turner, Francine Turner. He promised to show them the video at the same time it was shown to his peers. He promised that some people who might be able to help would see it. And he promised them something rare, a good time.
When the sun beats down and further down.
We'll have your picture. Well, look at it while you sing.
I think for the people that are coming tonight, I think it's going to give them an inspiration to do something.
Why, this is Hollywood. It's my oyster to be open.
He brought them to a small world that was not the real world. He didn't know it, but he opened their eyes to the reason help is so scarce and hope is so elusive. They watched the video and they saw themselves, and it was real.
This is what I wanted from the beginning of this film, to give them happiness.
School. They mingled a bit at the party later and made a few acquaintances, but they were as out of place in his world as he had been in theirs. It takes more than a night to cross some boundaries. The homeless understand that better than anyone.
What we need is affordable housing, education, and jobs.
But they don't care. So it's up to us to care for our own selves, you know?
Sitting in the theater with them has made the film even stronger for me. Because I could sit in there and I can edit it and I could shoot it, but being with them is a different feeling. It's, I don't know, it's a warmer feeling. I mean, I feel for them, I do. And I can say they're friends now. They're friends, and one of them said to me, I love you, and always keep in touch with me, and that makes me feel really, really good. It was real special for you to be here. Everyone really enjoyed it. We're gonna do it again.
The tent shelter you saw in Dan Levin's video is no longer there. 2 months after the story first aired, the Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church forced the tent off the property, saying that it is now going to develop that land. But most of the people in the video are, of course, still homeless. Levin and the tent's operator are now looking for a new site, and Levin is sending copies of his video to members of the LA City Council to enlist their help. He spent Christmas at the Mission in South Central LA distributing food to the homeless.
Well, Pope John Paul makes an emotional, historic visit to Mexico.
His visit is important, of course, to thousands of people here in the Southland, and we will see some of the images from the papal visit next on Prime 990.
You're watching Prime 990 with Pat Harvey and David Jackson.
First, let's take a look at the Pope's activities today. This is the second full day of Pope John Paul II's visit to Mexico. He met with Mexican President Salinas de Gortari today at Mexico's White House, called Los Pinos, which means the pine trees.
People in Mexico had been waiting 10 years for a papal visit when John Paul II stepped off that plane in Mexico City in May, and he didn't disappoint them. The 70-year-old traveling pope kept up a sprinter's pace. Mass in Mexico City, meetings with government officials, a visit to a prison in Durango, Mexico. Jane Velez-Mitchell and Luis Patino brought us the story of this historic papal visit. But it's the pictures of photographer Dolores Lopez that we want to share with you right now. Pictures that remind us that Mexico is a land of history, beauty, and faith.
David, a tremendous outpouring of love and affection and respect for Pope John Paul II and his visit to Mexico, even though there are still some divisions in the Catholic Church.
Very definitely in the Church. And it's interesting to see this Pope again because it reminds us of how active this single man has been within the Catholic Church and around the world with Catholics everywhere. And it's exciting to see him out there. He really does keep up a sprinter's pace.
It's a good way to describe it.
Right.
Well, when you give your car keys to a valet, you could be setting yourself up for trouble.
Target 9 reporter Bill Gephardt will show us why, and we will also see a report that led to an LAPD crackdown on valet parking. That's right around the corner on Prime 990.
You're watching Prime 990 with Pat Harvey and David Jackson.
You drive up to a restaurant, give the car keys to the attendant, and that's the last you think of it until you're ready to leave. You'd think a lot more about it if you knew you were exposing yourself to legal trouble. Target 9 reporter Bill Gephardt's story in August led to an LAPD crackdown.
Here's the first Kevin Daum knew that he was responsible for the accident of a valet.
So we're now named in this lawsuit for this child that was hit on this bike by this valet person.
Under the laws of California, the owner of the vehicle is responsible for any damage caused by the vehicle.
Kevin is being sued by this lawyer who represents the injured youth. The accident happened while a valet was parking Kevin's car 2 years ago in Tarzana. Even though the police report shows a valet for Bernard's Valet Service was driving when the child was struck on his bicycle, the law says Kevin Daum is partly responsible. Even Kevin's legal opponent says it's absurd.
It is ridiculous, and it's the legal system. It's the way our system is.
We often have little alternative but to use valet parking. Just how seriously do valets take their responsibility, knowing that the owner of a car is responsible for any accident that the valet might have? The last time you see your car is when you entrust it to the valet. But you really have any idea what might go on around the corner where they park these cars? Would you want this happening to your new car? The pavement shows signs many cars have bottomed out here, so I asked the valet about his driving habits. I speak English?
Yes.
Do you?
Yes.
You drive your own car like that?
Oh my God! I don't know.
No, because you just came flying over that thing. You could have damaged that car.
So.
Do you know whose responsibility it is? It's the owner's responsibility. It's not your responsibility. You always drive that fast with someone else's car? Right after that interview, the speed and the care of Valet seemed to improve as drivers pulled onto the lot slowly, with care. But this neighbor with 2 children worries as valet-driven cars speed past his home every evening.
Of course, you know, with the 2 kids that I have living in the house right there, it does concern me that the kids do dart out. You know, they can stay off the street, but they come down here pretty fast.
I did not realize that letting a valet park your car constitutes, you know, a permission for somebody to drive your car that would leave you liable in a case when he got in an accident.
There's something people do not understand, and that is the system is not always based on logic.
For Kevin Daum, he'll not give his car to another valet again until there is a change in the law.
As a result of our stories on valet parking, the LAPD cracked down on parking operators. Then the city of LA changed the permit process for parking operators, who now have to show the city they can park cars off the street. Well, Kermit the Frog loses his best friend.
And the world loses Mr. Wonderful. We will remember Sammy Davis Jr. next on Prime 990.
You're watching Prime 990 with Pat Harvey and David Jackson.
We knew Kermit and Miss Piggy years before we met Jim Henson. The creative genius behind these characters gave us a whole new form of entertainment, certainly an entirely new style of comedy, and even a new word, Muppets.
I've grown accustomed to your looks, accustomed to your voice, accustomed to your face.
Jim Henson was just one of the people that we lost in 1990. He gave life, of course, to a bunch of shag-carpeted characters called Muppets.
Well, the Muppets put Henson on top of a multi-million-dollar TV and movie empire. And along the way, Kermit, Miss Piggy, Fozzie, Big Bird, and the Cookie Monster taught millions of kids, and the rest of us too, a few things about reading, writing, and arithmetic, and about friendship and life.
Jim Henson's death was very sudden, but Sammy Davis Jr.'s came this year after a long struggle with cancer. During his last few months, his friends and his millions of fans paid him tribute.
When he died, entertainment editor John Corcoran reminded us how much Sammy Davis Jr. had been a part of all of our lives.
His show business career began at age 3 and spanned more than 60 years. It seemed that Sammy Davis Jr. was born to be a song and dance man.
You know, I learned to tap dance by standing in the wings and watching other acts. And of course, I learned from my dad and my Uncle Will. And they learned from other dancers.
He learned well. Davis's singing and dancing earned him the nickname Mr. Entertainment. He also became a card-carrying member of the Hollywood Rat Pack, a group of friends that included Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin.
Take it from me, don't be a do-badderer.
In the 1969 movie Sweet Charity, Davis was Big Daddy, a sort of beatnik guru to a motley band of followers.
Daddy started out in San Francisco, tooting on his trumpet loud and mean. Someday I'll have me a penthouse, stacks and stacks of folding green. EO11, EO11.
Davis had plenty to sing the blues about in his personal life. He often found that all the talent in the world didn't grant him immunity from racism, especially in the early years. Sometimes he wasn't allowed to take a room in the very hotels he performed in. He is credited with helping to break down some of those barriers, paving the way for future generations of black entertainers. Other personal problems included 2 failed marriages and years of alcohol and cocaine abuse.
He was nearly killed in a 1954 car accident that cost him his left eye. 50 years of cigarette smoking might have led to the throat cancer last year, the very cancer that finally claimed his life.
Merry Christmas.
One of Davis's final public appearances came as Grand Marshal of last year's Hollywood Christmas Parade. A few days earlier, some of the top talents in show business joined him at the Shrine Auditorium for a network special celebrating his 60 years as an entertainer.
The Candyman can. The Candyman can, 'cause he mixes it with love and makes the world taste good.
Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, Mary Martin, Laurence Olivier, Bart Giamatti, Armand Hammer. The list of artists and leaders we lost this year is a long one. Each of them changed the world a little. Some of them, like Sammy Davis Jr., left us something to remember them by.
Call me Mr. Bojangles. Mr. Bojangles. Come back and dance, 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 dance.
You can't please everybody, but you please the majority, and don't ever let them say, gee, I didn't like the performance. That doesn't mean everybody's going to like what you're doing, but at least they'll be able to say, he performed for me, man. He gave his all.
You're watching Prime 990 with Pat Harvey and David Jackson.
We're remembering some of the stories that made 1990 so memorable for you and us at Prime 9 News.
And this next story may be one of the most memorable of all. Your mother probably used to say this to you at one point. If somebody told you to go jump off a bridge, would you do it? Well, Matt Stevens found a group of people who definitely would, and they do. So fasten your seatbelt.
These cords that we get are not commercial cords. We get them from a special company, and they're to military specs. These are top-of-the-line mountain climbing harnesses, best you can buy.
Mortality will meet them all eventually, but for now it remains a stranger, an observer of a curious game that both defies and defines fear.
Everybody's got to do something crazy, and this is it. I'm just thinking of the insanity, and you got to do something to have a thrill.
I know it's going to be scary. And to be confronted with it once you look over the edge is going to be scary.
You all set?
That was pretty cool.
Well, it's really bad for me, first person.
I know.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I'm scared.
All right, here we go. You're supposed to be scared. This is a bridge.
Jump out as far as you can.
And people aren't supposed to be jumping off bridges.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm about to get tossed off the bridge.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Do it to me again. No fear. You conquer it all before you get to this bridge.
It's absolute panic because you can't believe you're just falling and falling and falling and you're not hitting.
It was really, really scary. It's a scary thing to do.
You really don't have too much time to think about anything. You can't hear anything. It's a real calm, peaceful feeling.
Yeah.
I want you to power out hard.
Okay.
All right, let's count them down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
was to ancient South Pacific tribes a ritual, a rite of passage, a means of proving courage. It could be nothing else now.
Thank you.
Matt Stevens, Channel 9 News, the Angeles National Forest.
Yeah!
Well, 1990, obviously an important year for all of us, our first year on the air here at Prime 9 News, and for me personally, of course, 3 months overseas, 3 months in the Persian Gulf area, about 7 total countries, and a lot of difficult times over there, but a fascinating story to cover. Unfortunately, as we said a little earlier in this program, it's not a resolved situation. We don't really know where it's going to go 15 days from now when the UN deadline comes about, but as anybody would at the end of the year, we can only say that we hope and pray that there will be a peaceful solution to this. No indication yet that it's going that direction, but that is certainly my wish, and I'm sure you share that with me at the end of the year as we look forward to 1991.
There's no question about that. I've said this on the air publicly, but I will again. We've certainly enjoyed your reports, and so did our viewers. You kept us on the edge of our seats, bringing us information as to what was going on in that part of the world. We also had many dignitaries, many guests come by Channel 9 News and appear on our program to talk about that situation. 1990 was certainly an exciting year to be a journalist. We saw the collapse of the Berlin Wall in Germany. Communism changed its face in Russia, and after 27 years, we saw the release of a black South African leader, and now we're reporting on events in the Mideast. But the best story we can report is, of course, that there is peace in the Mideast.
Right. Well, there is so much we wanted to show you, but we cannot fit all of 1990 into just 1 hour.
So, we've got a second hour all lined up, and we hope you'll join us tomorrow night at 9 for Images 90.
And of course, we want to thank you for being part of our first year here at Prime 9 News. We hope to see everybody again in 1991. Prime 9 News at 10 o'clock is next tonight.
Happy New Year, everybody, and good night.
You gotta smile some.
I want to get my chattering teeth. Come here. Come here. Get that sound of it.
Hey, Stevie, hold that up. Hold that up.
Hi, I'm John Corcoran. Larry! There is no way I'm going to get to see you. You can hear they're having a good time. Let's see what they think about having a graduation party with no alcohol. Wait a second. Wait, one at a time. What do you think of having no booze here? Huh? No booze. What do you think of that?
Oh, sucks! Even kids that are old enough to know better than to do that on live television are here enjoying this show. Easy, guys.
The EPA's cleanup plan was required by a federal court order. The plan, however, breaks very little new ground. And I'm about to cry.
Only about half of the dogs that what? One more time, I promise. This is the last time. But the training isn't cheap. It costs about $20,000 per guide dog. We're just a couple more times. We got just a couple more to do.
Fairy dust time. Thank you. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, John Travolta.
Trick or treat!
Oh, no. This is absolutely the silliest thing I've ever seen.
Do you know who we are?
Yes, that's Jerry Dunphy.
Oh, he nailed me.
All right, the way you do. As pretty as you are. You know you could have been an outlaw.
Look at all the paparazzi wasting their flashes.
What is wrong with you?
It's that little one.
I don't mean to, embarrass you, but I think you're beautiful.
Thank you very much. And I watch you every day on Love Connection.
Bless you. Thank you.
What was
This whole place could go soon. Rescue workers have cut fire lines, hoping that if it comes up this ridge, it won't take these homes, but it's time for all of us to leave now.
Brush fire is raging right now, and it's moving this way. So I think I'm going to pitch it back to you, and we might get out of the way. Reporting live, Joe Avalon.
All right.